after a while you'll start to have,
That's my left hand picture.
you will have 20 jars in your house with different shape, different mosses, different plants, and then your family will start to ask you, when are you going to stop making more of it?
Okay. Hi guys, today I'm here with Bryan from NEU Battery Materials.
Hi everyone. So today we'll be doing a terrarium workshop. I'll spend some time to teach you a little bit more about what is a terrarium and how to make a closed terrarium. The beautiful thing about closed terrarium is that it has its own ecosystem. So if you look at our world, we have our rain that comes down into the plants and the trees, and then it will evaporate out. We can actually simulate that all inside a small little jar like this.
Okay, so we should go through all the ingredients.
Yes.
And maybe you can tell me more about
Sure.
what they're about.
So in order to make a terrarium, we need to have a couple of things. So we'll start off with what we call a false bottom. So a false bottom is basically it's basically stones that we'll have in the bottom of the terrarium, and this will help accumulate water in the process. So if you think about it, when you water the plant, right, you don't want the water to be stuck in your soil. So you want it to drain into a layer called a false bottom, and that will include different types of soil, different types of stones, such as the ones that you see here, and we have different types of them to go along as well. So above the false bottom layer, we'll have soil, and then you'll put your plants and the different decorations, or what we call scapes, inside the terrarium, and then you'll finish it off with some moss that goes inside. Yeah. So that in essence is the whole terrarium, and then you close the lid, you turn on the light, and you should be good to go.
And the light is what we have here on the lid. So this light, do I have to turn it on and off?
Yes.
Morning and night?
So if you want to grow your plants healthily, you need to simulate and mimic the sun basically. Right. So turn it on when you wake up, turn it off at the end of the day, then the plants will continue to grow. Now, I would say that the light that we have here is not good enough to have a good strong growth in the plants that we have. So in what we have here in this case is Fittonia. We call it like a vein leaf, because if you look at the leaf carefully, it actually simulates and look like veins on our body. So they call it a vein plant, but the proper name is Fittonia. So in order for this to grow well, it does require a bit of sunlight. So one of the challenges of a small closed terrarium is that you must ensure good control of humidity, enough sunlight for the plants to grow, and if it's too humid or if there's not enough plants to circulate the air, you will have cases of like molding, and that's where additional, I would call them pests, will come into the closed terrarium. Pests such as springtail. So springtails are basically detrivores, a small little white little insects that would eat mold in the process. Right, so if you have any mold inside the closed terrarium, you don't want to spread, because once you spread, all your plants will die. So springtails will help eat the mold and help remove decaying matter. Or let's say a leaf were to fall off from your plant, you want it to decay and break down, you will need detrivores like springtails. Other examples of detrivores would include isopods. So I have some springtails and isopods here, and what we have here today is a isopod called the Cubaris panda king. So it's a small little fella. When they feel threatened, they will curl up into a ball as a form of self-defense. But after a while, they will open up and they will start to crawl around. So they serve the same purpose as a springtail. They will actually eat decaying matter. So if you are brave enough, go ahead, so you have a little touch. So once you touch them, they'll continue to stay in the ball. But once
Half out of the shell.
they are. So they are, very interestingly, they are not insects. A lot of people get that misconception. They think that, oh, this is an insect, what kind of insect pests are you keeping? But actually, these are land crustaceans. So the most common isopods that people would see are actually the ocean ones. They're very big, they're about this size, and they're huge. Yeah.
In this shape.
Yeah, they look exactly the same, but they're the huge one and a bit more scary and creepy.
Okay.
But the land ones are more friendly, right?
Okay.
So they come in different colors, they come in different species, and in fact, there are thousands of species of isopods. So much so that even till today, we are discovering new isopod species. You can go into a cave, you can turn over a log, and you will find a brand new species right there. So recently in Singapore, I think we found a new species called the Singapore tiger. Trust me, there are thousands and thousands of them, and because they breed very rapidly as well, so it gives you the chance to have different permutation. So from this Cubaris panda king, you can actually have different permutations like albino, different species. It's very interesting species to look at, and they come in different colors, which can be very interesting, different shapes. Some of them can be like 3-4 times the size that you're holding on now. So of course they're not going to fit inside here. Most people keep them for pets, but you can put them in a closed terrarium.
Okay.
So the only tricky part is that if you want to put them in a closed terrarium, you have to regulate the living environment because it is quite harsh in a sense because it's a closed terrarium. Yes.
Oh,
It's starting to move already.
Oh, hello.
Can support him to. There we go.
Stand up. Oh, hi. Don't fall down.
Yeah. So we'll put that fella in.
Okay.
One of the downside of a small closed terrarium, at least in my time that I've been working with them, which was about the past 2 years, they don't survive or they don't have a high survival rate, both isopods and plants. Mainly because you need to be able to regulate the humidity, the water level, and the sunlight very well. If you just leave it in your cupboard, for example, or just on the side of the table, chances are they'll live, but not for long. Mosses, on the other hand, yes, they will have a high chance of survival. I have a closed terrarium with moss that has been surviving for 2 years already. But for plants, it is still quite difficult, especially on a small scale. So if you want, in the future, you can make a very big closed terrarium. The trick is that jars like these come in any form. You might have an old jar or like an old wine bottle or something that's huge but can contain plants. That can be the tank.
I see.
Yeah. So I guess we can start first.
Yeah, sure. I said, get this guy back
You
into
can
the
put him
box
back
first.
inside here.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay, so today
Where do we
you'll be
start?
doing most of the work.
Okay,
My job is just to explain,
Can.
and your job is to get your hands dirty.
sure.
I think getting your hands dirty is part of the fun in making a terrarium. It is a therapeutic process for me, and I hope that in this process you will also find that, after a long day of work, you come back home. It's just nice to look at plants and the different moss that you have inside. Maybe you see some isopods walking around.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start. So you have a couple of stones here. So they are all serving the same purpose. You can have a mixture of them. So some big stones, some small stones. This will allow more of it to fill up the terrarium. Okay. In that process, then you'll be able to have drainage. That's very important because you don't want soil plants to walk.
Okay.
Prior to this, we've already actually checked the height of your plant. So if you put the plant just beside the tank now, you realize that it's also a bit tall. So you have to be careful in terms of how much stones you want to put,
Okay. So not
so
too
that you
much.
don't protrude out.
Okay.
Okay, so just pour a handful of that and some of these as well.
So is
inside
there
here.
a distinction in different types of stones, right? Or it's just serving a generic purpose of
Yes. So
capturing
it
the
does
water?
serve a generic purpose of water capture. Most people choose stones that they like in terms of color. For example, you don't want a bright blue stone inside, right? Because you might take the attention out of the plants and the moss, and it goes into the stones. So we generally choose darker color stones. such as the ones that you have or the ones that are in the smaller container.
So should we go for a bit more?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. So I think that's a good amount. So you can use this as well. Just put some.
One side.
Yep. And just give it a good mix. Nice. Okay. So this will be your what we call the false bottom. Right. All the water, because there are gaps between the stones, will actually seep down and catch itself here.
Okay.
So when it evaporates, it will go through the stones, and then it will go up the soil, and then it will go up and condensate, come back down.
Okay.
So you are creating the water cycle here.
Okay.
Primary school science, huh?
Been a while.
Okay, so one thing that by right we should have as well,
Yeah.
which we do not have here today, is charcoal.
Okay.
So for most of us, we know charcoal as something that you would barbecue with. Right, but the good thing about charcoal is that it actually purifies a lot of water, a lot of bacteria and harmful toxins inside the water.
Okay.
If you look at I think there's a very famous pen, or like a pen-shaped kind of water syringe that you will suck up from, let's say, a dirty river. It will actually have charcoal inside as well.
Yeah. It's a live straw, I think.
Yeah, the live straw. So similarly, we should have some charcoal here, so that when the water goes down, it passes through the charcoal, it purifies itself, and when it goes back up, it will become cleaner.
Okay. So
but
I have a lot of charcoal at home. Can I?
Yes,
After that,
you can.
Like using a tweezer to move away.
It won't
something?
be simple, but
Okay.
you can try.
Okay.
You can try.
But it needs to be a layer above the rock.
Yes. So
Okay.
it basically needs to be in the same layer as the rock.
Okay.
So this is one layer that we'll call it, and then you will cover it with a mesh of sort.
Okay.
So ideally, we try to cover as much of the rock so that the soil, the purpose of it is not to allow soil to go through. Right, because once the soil goes into the stone, then you, in essence, have a weaker false bottom. Soil will just get wet, and then it'll go up, and then mold will start to grow.
Okay.
Yeah. So the difficult part about a circular terrarium is that you must cut a mesh that is circular. But it's okay. For today, I think this is quite good already. You have covered most of it. And the next layer is to actually add the soil.
The soil. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm thinking one step like a bit further down, right? So when
Sure.
you move the Fittonia in, so you need to clear a circle in the center, right?
So we try not to put as much soil as we need first.
Okay.
You just need to add enough so that the Fittonia can go in, we can align the things. Once you put the soil, then we'll start to think about how do you want to scape your terrarium. Because you have a couple of things inside, right? You have a plant, you have mosses, and you have some rocks. So you need to have an idea of how you want it to look like. What is the outcome? If you don't have if you don't know the outcome of your terrarium, right, then in essence you are planning for failure already. Because you'll be doing all kinds of stuff only to realize that, oh, I don't have space for the rock.
Okay.
Oh, I can't fit the plant, you know. Yeah, so spread it out. Just get it around. Wonderful. Okay. Can I add a little bit more? Try to cover up all the edges. Okay, I think that's a good start. Yep. Okay, so the next step, right, is I want you to take this out.
Okay.
So you can hold the plants, by their stem. Just squeeze the container a little bit, and you should be able to pull out everything, including the soil that comes with it.
Okay. Should I do it over the thing?
Do it here.
Yeah.
So we try not to take as much of the soil from this pot.
Oh.
The reason why is that you have no idea what's inside here.
Okay.
The first thing, right, is you could be carrying pests.
Ah.
Now, I've actually saw some pests already. I can show you here. So I spotted a mealybug inside your plant. Now, the more pests you bring into your system, the more damage it will cause onto your terrarium.
Okay.
So this is a mealybug, and it will spread. What a mealybug will do is that they will actually stay under the leaf, and they
Yeah.
will eat and rot your plant. So when you make a terrarium, you need to be careful of pests on the plant and pests in the soil.
Okay.
You could be carrying snails. You could be carrying millipedes.
Mm.
So I can show you. You have a snail here.
Huh. Wow, so sharp-eyed. What in the world?
So it's a very small snail, and
not
it's
sure that will
impossible. It's impossible for you to get rid of all the pests,
Mm.
but you should try your best to get rid of as much as you can.
I just eat. Wow, yeah, it is a snail.
Because what happens is that the snail will grow, and how it
Ah.
grows is that it eats your plant. It eat the leaf.
Okay.
So after a while, you'll notice that there are holes,
Mm.
and then you know you have a pest inside.
Mm.
So if you want to build a terrarium that will last, you need to get rid of as much soil as
Okay.
possible.
Okay.
If you're at home, what I would recommend is that you actually exactly. So you have a tub of water.
Yeah.
You just put the whole plant in. You wash it. Then most of the soil will come out, and you'll be left with the bare roots
Mm.
and the plant. You put the roots in properly, and then you will grow.
Ah, okay.
But for today's sake, I just want you to take it out,
Remove, okay.
and then we'll try to get rid of as much soil as possible.
Okay, I'm gonna shake out the soil into a bag.
Okay, so now you have you can actually see the plant and the roots by itself, right?
Mm.
So you can tell that it's quite a healthy plant. There's a lot of roots growing out,
Okay.
and you need to decide now
Mm.
where do you want to put the plant. Right? You have some rocks.
Mm.
You have a moss, a very big moss here as well.
Okay.
So you need to have an idea of where you want to put your plant.
Mm.
So what I would recommend is that we keep the moss in front,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you look at it, you see the moss.
Mm.
Your plant can be either the center
Mm-hmm.
or the back of it.
Okay.
So it's either the rock in the center or
Okay.
the plant in the center with the rocks around it.
Okay.
Can you
I like
visualize
the. I like the plant at the back and then
plant
like
at the back.
garden at the front.
Okay, so you have the garden, which is the moss,
Yeah.
your stones,
Yeah.
and then the plant.
The plant.
Okay. So now what you can do, right, is if you can,
Mm.
try to split this into half.
Split this into half.
Yeah,
So we're
split.
using half of the plant.
We'll see, depending
Okay.
on how big the space occupies,
Okay.
we'll put them along the sides here.
Ah, okay.
So now it's very big, right? So once you go in, it will
Yeah.
occupy the entire thing. So what you want it to
Okay.
do is you want to, yes, correct. It should naturally open up. Yes, very good.
Don't tear it. Don't tear it. Oh,
Very
more
good,
soil.
very good, very good. Okay, so let's use this one first.
Okay.
Right, put this one down.
Can I mix it here?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so now what you need to do, right, is you need to hold the terrarium with one hand, make some space, right, and then try to slot the plant here. Now you can tell that this is quite tall already,
Yeah.
right, but the amount of soil you have here is not a lot.
Mm.
So you will need to
Add in more soil.
you need to add more soil to support it.
Okay.
So for now, you just put the placement. Let's see how tall the plant is first.
Okay.
Okay.
That's very tall.
Yeah, so it is a bit tall. Okay. What I would recommend. Do you have scissors?
Don't have. I have a knife right there.
Just going to show you. So I'll take out the video. It is a bit tall. Yeah, that was one of the videos.
So what will happen is the plant will just grow along the sides of the
Yeah. So
Okay.
what we can do, right, is we actually push it down a bit. That means that you don't put the roots upright. You put the roots a bit
Side.
slanted.
Okay.
Ideally, this is not the best, but we work with what we have.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, I like maybe not using all of the Fittonia.
Yeah.
You just have this,
Yep.
and then having more green.
Yep. So you can always add more in the bin.
Yeah.
You just need to slowly fill up the areas more. Okay, so if you can imagine now, this is the back of your terrarium, right? You have a little bit of plants growing out. Then now you have a better idea. What we need is we need to water the soil. If you have any. Okay.
No. I have coffee that I made for today.
I'm sure you got a sink downstairs, right?
Yes. I can go down and get, but I say my hands are dead. Okay. We will pause for now. Okay, and we are back with water.
Okay, so now we have a cup of water, which is quite important because we'll need to wet the soil
Okay.
so that you can create the water system, and then the plant can also grow.
So this is the amount of water that will be recycled
Yes.
in this ecosystem.
So whatever water you
Okay.
put inside will be water that will be permanently inside your closed terrarium. It will
Okay.
be used, it will sink down to the bottom, it will go into your first bottom, it will condense it up when it reaches the top.
Okay.
Before we do that, so this is a very common equipment that people with terrarium will use. It's a gigantic tweezer. The reason why we buy a giant tweezer is so that you can do micro adjustments needed. Sometimes our hands are too big, right? And then you can't move a lot of plants. So what you can do is you can use this, you can pick up the plant and you can move it around. So let's say for example you want to shift it a little bit. Instead of using your hand, you can actually use the tweezer to move it around. You know, so for example, like some of the plants are touching each other, you can pick it up and you can move it around.
Okay.
Okay, so we've created some space between each plant.
Okay. Do we need to fill the soil
Yes.
gaps and all that?
You should.
Okay.
So you can also use your spoon to push the soil around. So making terrarium is a very delicate art. It takes a lot of patience, you know. Sometimes you feel like there's a small little gap. You can actually use a small spoon to slowly push it. But when you start to lose patience, you will just take the big spoon and throw the whole thing in. So it teaches you the art of patience.
I'm still learning.
Yeah. So especially when you work with big terrariums, it can be quite tiring because there's a lot of different components, and sometimes moving a plant can really affect how the whole system will look like.
I see.
On a bigger scale, you know, I've worked with terrariums that would take me weeks to make. So I will start at the bottom, and then I'll decide, okay, how do I want to do it? What kind of plants do I want to have? Where do I want to put them? And that design could take maybe 1 week. And sometimes you may need to make things from scratch. So I will have like different types of materials I have to cut up, then I'll glue them together. It really depends on your creativity. So the creativity becomes the limit here because you can have actually a waterfall system inside as well. You can create a lake, you can create a sandy beach, totally up to you. So we'll start with adding some water in.
Okay. And this is for the whole,
Yes.
around the whole
So
terrarium.
try to wet all the soil as possible, as much of the soil, so that you can evenly create wet soil. Take your time. So the water system is very important, right, in a closed terrarium, because if you can imagine, if you don't put water inside, then there is no way the plant can grow, right? You look at the basic things that a plant need. You need water, sunlight, and food, right? And the food comes from the soil, the nutrients, and also decaying matter, right? So if the plant leaf were to drop, the detrivores like the springtails, isopods will return back the nutrients to the soil.
I just watered the plant itself.
No, it's fine, don't worry. They're not that delicate actually. They're stronger than you think.
Yeah. I think it's
And
unsure of handling the plant.
don't worry. After a while, you'll start to see that you can just pick them up, fling
Yeah.
them around, they'll still be
Oh.
okay. So the water is quite important, and the balance is the tricky part now, right? So the question is how much is enough, and how much is too little. The general rule of thumb is that you should see some water at the bottom of your rocks.
Okay.
That means the false bottom must be able to capture water, and that will be enough. Because you're saying that now there's sufficient water in the soil, so much so that water actually drips out of the soil into the false bottom.
Okay.
And then that allows it to condensate. I mean, it slowly travels up and condensate.
Okay, let's see what we have. The water.
Yep.
Okay.
I
Oh,
can
there's
see
a bit
some.
of, yeah.
You can see some of the water layer here.
Yeah.
So that's how you know that there is water down in the bottom. And that's the purpose of the false bottom. Yeah. We can start with this amount of water first. So over the weeks you'll be able to tell. When the water evaporates, right, your closed terrarium will start to get very misty.
Okay.
So you'll see a lot of water vapor forming on the sides of the jar. And then you'll know that the system is working.
Okay.
So when you come out of a cold room or like in the next morning you wake up, you will actually find a side of it that is covered in mist. And that's completely normal.
Okay.
So if you really want, you can actually open up, aerate a bit. But if you do open up, then make sure to add water later on. But you don't. It doesn't mean that every time you open up, you have to add a lot of water. Because when you open up, only a bit of moisture will come out.
Okay.
Depending on how long you leave it out as well.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So-
what's the purpose of actually opening up?
The purpose why you would open up or why you would break the concept of closed terrarium is because some of the conditions are not met properly.
Okay.
Meaning there's not enough sunlight, there's not enough water or too much water,
Okay.
the humidity is wrong,
Okay.
right? So the easiest way to regulate is of course open up, right? Then the natural air will flow in, the sunlight can come in, and then you just have to water it. It's just like a
Okay.
normal
It's like a
plant
reset
that,
lah.
yeah,
Oh.
it's like a normal plant that you would grow.
I
right?
see,
If you
I
buy
see.
a normal plant,
Yeah.
you just put it in a pot. You just need to water it.
Okay.
The conditions around you is enough for it to grow. So where closed terrarium comes a little bit more tricky is when you have to look after the conditions. You need to fine tune the conditions. So there are systems out in the market where they help you do that. Or that comes with a hefty price lah.
Yeah.
So they will have systems that provide lighting,
Yeah.
fan to regulate the humidity, and misting system to allow you to increase the humidity if you need, and also
Okay.
provide the water.
Okay.
So what we're building is more of the basic form of terrarium. And the interesting thing about terrariums, right, is that there are a lot of people who would scavenge different parts of their area to make terrariums.
Oh, so they are doing a copy and paste of their
Correct.
environment into
Exactly.
a small
Right. So
one.
if you go to a rainforest, you see the wonderful trees, the mosses around you. You can actually pick out the different things. Of course, in a legal place. Right? So I'm not asking you to go to illegal place to steal plants, but where allowed, you can actually take the moss, like for example the Holland moss that you have here.
Yeah.
It actually just grows off the ground,
Yeah.
right? So you can just pick it up from the ground. The good practice for the industry is that if you find moss, you can take some, but don't take all of it. Take enough for yourself, but enough for the area to grow back as well. So what we'll do is then we'll cover it up again.
Okay.
So it'll be looking a bit more sparse, but
Yeah.
that will grow
back.
again. So that's the ethical way of scavenging. Okay, so now that we have the idea of your plants,
Yeah.
what we will do next is to decide which stones you would like to use. Okay, so there are a couple of stones that I'm putting out on the table here. You have different sizes as well. So have a look at them, feel them, look at the height, the texture, find something that speaks to you. Because ultimately you're the one that's looking at it.
Stones actually.
So you can have a big stone as a centerpiece, you can have small stones around it if you feel structures. Yeah, you can even stack them up on each other.
Oh, I found it already. I like this.
Okay, so it's going
Tunnel.
in like this, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So now what you need to do is you need to make sure that your stones can stand.
Okay.
Because what you're looking at now is the back.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have an idea of the centerpiece of your
Okay.
terrarium.
So this goes before the moss, then you
Yes.
move the moss around. This doesn't go inside the moss.
The general rule is actually the hardscape, which is the stones, should go in first. In
Okay.
fact, before the plant.
Okay.
But because the terrarium is a bit smaller, so
Mm.
I made you put the plants at the back first.
Oh, okay.
Then you can work towards the front. So we go from the back, stones in the center, then whatever balance, we try to cover up with the moss. that we have.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
You will. The next step is for you to decide where you want to put your moss. So you have a very big piece of moss here, but you have small pieces here which are very important as well. Because the small pieces will help you fill up the areas that you have gaps along the way. The hard part is to put them all inside now. Because if you look at it, the back of your plants have empty spaces which you can put moss.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to rock your structure as well. So what you can do now is you can have a look at the different sizes that you have here today, and then decide for yourself which is the best for your system. So ideally you want to find a big piece of moss that goes to the front, because that
So
is
yeah.
very standardized, very easy. So try, pick up the moss, and it's not going to be easy, so you need to go in, because your container is very narrow right on the top, so you need to find a way to put it in. Does it fit?
Barely.
Okay.
I should not have put a...
Okay, so
Oh, I know. I
why
take
don't
out
we-
the stone first.
Exactly, why don't we take out one first? Yeah, take out that one.
And then
Okay, then you have a bit of room now.
use this to support later.
Fill it
Yeah,
up.
let me do it. This is really very therapeutic.
After a while, you'll start to have,
That's my left hand dexterity.
you will have 20 jars in your house, right? With different shape, different mosses, different plants, and then your family will start to ask you, when are you going to stop making more of it? That was
That was your,
yeah, that
your
was
experience.
that was my life during COVID, because I think in the early days of COVID we had a lot of free time on weekends as well, and during the lockdown period. So there was nothing to do at home except make terrariums. And at one point in time, I think I had like 20 terrariums in my house, different sizes. I would just go to IKEA and I'll look, hey, glass jar. You know, you go to the kitchenware, right? People think like they are making cold drinks in their jar. Actually, no, I'm buying it to make terrariums. So the most interesting place to get odd shaped jars are places
IKEA.
like IKEA, Daiso,
Second-hand shop.
second shop, those kind of places. And then you get odd shapes, because odd shapes create the uniqueness of the jar, you see. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna fill that gap there with some stones.
Yes. Which one?
I like the dark ones.
Okay.
Okay.
So close it and turn on the light. Let's see how it looks like.
Oh, stress.
Ready?
Wow.
Oh, there we go.
That's really something. I understand what you mean by you have 10 or something.
Right. So after a while, right, the moss adds a very nice delicate feel to your terrarium,
Yeah.
especially Holland moss, because it looks like a giant grass patch inside a small bowl. So one of the best thing about looking at terrarium is that it really simulates a specific part of the world, or like a specific, for example, I'm doing a rainforest theme. It does it very well. And if you can do an ecosystem where there are live creatures, it creates an additional touch. When I first started, there were no isopods, there were no springtail. It was just plants and moss. And then I started to learn that, hey, mold is forming. What can I do to solve mold? And then I started to learn that, springtails are one of the options.
Yeah.
And then once I got springtails in, then it will clear the mold. But you always feel that there's a small bit of part missing in this, which is living creatures moving around.
Yeah.
So that's where isopods will start to come in, because then you start to see things move.
It's quite funny because I'm already distracted. I'm trying to find George.
I think he's still here. I see him.
He's still caught up there.
But you lost the other two already.
Yeah, I lost the other two already. They found their new home.
So when you have holes inside, like the one in between the crevice of your stones here,
yeah.
they tend to go inside and hide. I have a very high chance, I believe there's a very high chance that you will not see them for a very long time. Because you have a lot of crevices.
Yeah.
They will rarely come out because there's no reason for them to, unless you put some food. So if you are rearing isopods, what we put as food can be things like frozen prawn shells.
Okay.
So they like to eat a lot of calcium-rich products.
Okay.
Because isopods will shed, meaning that the outer layer will actually shed. You know, like when you eat shellfish kind, right? They will shed the skin. Same concept. So they need strong calcium products to help them shed.
Okay.
If there is a lack in calcium, then they will not be able to shed properly. Or we call it mold lah. So they will not mold properly.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks so much for the tutorial. This is my first terrarium. I feel like I got a lot of distraction from this, looking at this all the time. And George is moving around already. Bye, George.
Bye bye.
It's up already. Oh, great. Cool. Well, thanks so much. We will now move on to our second section, where we talk to Bryan about his startup, NEU Battery Materials. Okay. Now we need to clean up.